Welcome to Disconnected. Please like, subscribe, and comment down below if you think, if you agree, or if you think I'm talking shite. Anyway, I think today is going to be a little bit of a Brexit day because the news is full of all the decline in of the economy of the UK economy, and where its growth ranking sits currently at -6 or something like that. The first video I saw this morning, why is the UK economy predicted to perform so badly, from Sky News.
Most quite interesting restaurants. Normally this place is packed. Today they aren't even serving lunch, just preparing for the evening.
But normally, obviously, if the lunch was happening, this would be...
We would be in lunch service now, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The problem isn't so much demand, people still want to eat out. It's that, amongst other things, restaurants like this can't get the staff.
If I advertise, what I get now is I get 4 or 5 CVs from abroad, mostly from the EU, people who I can't employ. If we could have full employment, all of those people would be generating national insurance, income tax, the VAT that on the cup of coffee that you buy on your way to the train station in the morning. That all generates wealth, and that wealth is not being generated because we can't operate at full capacity.
So he's saying that his biggest problem is not the lack of customers or potential customers, but the fact that he is finding it hard to employ enough people, mainly because I'm assuming that most of the guys and girls or people that he employed was possibly from mainland Europe, and obviously Brexit has made that extremely difficult nowadays. Anecdotally, I would like to add, I think that I would be surprised if the amount of potential customers is still the same as it was, let's say, 5 years ago, with the constraints on people's budgets currently, with Brexit, with energy crisis, with inflation, etc. But we'll take his word for it.
Extrapolate this across the country and you start to see why the International Monetary Fund is so pessimistic about the UK's prospects. Back in October, they thought economic growth, the red bar here, would be somewhere in the middle of the industrialised pack this year. Its new forecasts paint a far gloomier picture. The UK the weakest, not just in the developed world, but of any country mentioned by the fund, including Russia. Why? Its chief economist says it's partly those labour shortages, partly higher taxes, partly Brexit, and partly higher energy costs.
We've had a very sharp increase in natural gas prices, energy prices in the UK, and there is a larger share of energy that is coming from natural gas, with a higher pass-through to final consumers, and so that has affected. There's been a stronger cost of living crisis, if you want, in the UK.
So what I don't understand about the UK is, like, once something like this really happens and the UK does have massive access to its own source for power through renewables, through the oil fields, through the gas fields in the north, etc. The only thing that's making this expensive is the fact that it is run by companies who are both subsidized and don't necessarily pay the taxes that they should. This is the easiest and quickest solution, is to just nationalize the bastards and use our own energy that we can produce and probably even sell. We know that Scotland, for example, produces enough electricity to sometimes have enough to also sell. Okay, so there is no reason that we should have a shortage or should pay high prices, except for political will to not do it.
But has the fund gone a bit too far?
I think it's a little bit too negative, given the state of the economy. It's saying that the UK will perform at the bottom of the G7 in those terms. I don't think that's where we're going to sit. We're going to sit in the middle of the pack.
Now, this is weird. So I hate doing this because obviously this guy is all educated and in the business and should probably know a ton more than I do. But I think one of the problems with folk like that is that they don't have their ear on the ground amongst normal people. There's not a person that I know that isn't complaining about money or their wages or how far their salary is taking them during the month. I don't know anybody who is positive about the future or sees, an end to this, with inflation and Brexit and Ukraine war and the energy crisis and this, that, and the other. There's also another aspect which I don't understand, which is purely logical. Like you look at the UK. The UK, especially England, has nothing. So what I mean by that, they have nothing that they are creating out of nothing and then selling outside of the country. They're not like Germany that produces a lot of high value stuff and sells it internationally. The UK has financial institutions which basically just launder money. Then they have some services and maybe a bit of produce here and there. But it's nothing in quantity that can be compared to the likes of the United States or Australia or anything like that. In fact, that's part of the whole Brexit problem, was that they went and they made certain deals with countries like Australia, which actually reduces the amount that we can sell or reduces the amount of money a farmer can make, because they can literally get stuff like lamb cheaper from there. So I find it weird that from a point of sitting in the UK, seeing that actually there's very little that we can actually offer, and the little bit that we have to offer, we've even lost the ease of working with our closest and biggest market, like the EU, that there's any sort of hope of this being turned around unless Brexit is reversed. I find it really weird that there is a logic which doesn't say, well, this is now where we're at, end of story. And trying to say that it isn't that bad and we'll be somewhere in the middle, when we actually have no room to move. The UK doesn't have any way of fixing this unless they go back into the European market. Every market that we currently have, every market that we currently have access to costs us money and has got all the usual bureaucracy and additional kind of import and export taxes and problems associated with it. The ease of doing business with a mass amount of countries who all have money, is gone. So I find it weird that he would make such a statement. It is kind of, looking at everything, it is pretty clear that this is the only way this is going to go, which is badly.
It's just a forecast. It'll probably end up being wrong. And it doesn't change much in practice. Life, the economy, the cost of living crisis, it all goes on as it was pretty much before. But it is awfully awkward for the government. Only a week or two ago, the Treasury was saying that the IMF and its forecast were part of the reason the UK wasn't alone in facing tough economic times. Now we are very much alone at the very bottom of those league tables.
I think that's another important point, because the excuse was always that, look, it's not just the UK, everybody's doing poorly because of, energy crisis in Ukraine and this, that, and the other. But the truth is, from all the predictions and even stuff that's happening now, right now, the UK is performing poorly. When people are going to understand that it is literally due to, we have a awful government. We're not nationalizing things that we could, and Brexit is beyond me. Why people are still denying it. Here's another video. How people feel about Brexit. This is from Sunderland, talking to folk, some who have and some who haven't voted for Brexit.
82,000. When it became...
I like the look on this woman's face. She obviously was not a Brexiteer. Look.
82,000.
When it became the first big UK city to declare for leave.
It's the word Schadenfreude, right? It is so bad because you kind of have a bit of Schadenfreude because all these people that were so happily cheering now sit in this position where they're kind of fucked, right? But But at the same time, it affects all of us. So it's like shooting yourself in the foot as well, having Schadenfreude, because like we're all in the same boat now. You know, the ones who voted for Brexit and the ones who didn't, we're all kind of fucked. Thank you very much, people. Anyway, let's keep looking.
Braving the cold. So, how is that decision going down?
I thought it was a bad idea, and I can see why people were convinced by Boris and, you know, the various things that were said. Like,
I cannot see how people were convinced. These people were absolutely clear bullshitters and liars and snake oil salesmen. Any logic would have prevailed there if, you know, any sensible person would see the bullshit that they was talking about was just nonsense. The 350 million per week and all that stuff, it was so clearly absolute bullshit. You know, the first thing I've always thought when they went on about that 350 million that we have to pay to the EU is like, if I don't have to pay that, it's definitely not going back into the country. It just isn't. They're going to find some way to fucking swipe that and put that in their own pockets or their friends' pockets or corporations' pockets. I mean, that was the most obvious thing under the sun.
350 million per week for NHS, which hasn't happened.
Don't know that it's made a huge difference to my life. I thought it was a good idea at the time, and I still think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I'm sure that there's a lot of people for whom it really just doesn't matter either way or the other. People who might already have a lot of money, or people that are on pension with a half-decent pension. I think there's a lot of people, or people who are in a half-decent job that seems fairly secure. Obviously, those people will be like not affected, but this is the problem in society nowadays. Like, so you're just thinking about yourself there. The issue with only thinking about yourself and making sure that you're okay is the fact that everybody's well-being affects everybody's well-being. The more people that are doing well, the better everybody is going to be doing, right? If you have a disproportionate wealth, even if you're one of the lucky ones who's sitting on top, your life is degraded because of other people struggling. It is that simple. We are all intertwined. Our society is intertwined, and there's no way to unweave it.
Just a complete disaster what's happening. I thought we'd get a hit for at least a year to 2 years. Then the UK would eventually come back to us and we'd be a rich country. But
I never understood from the start why anybody would think that if we, as the UK, who basically has shrunk in size since the whole all the colonies were kind of, given back to, who they belong to in the first place. I never understood how a country that is so ingrained in its traditions with its monarchy and its lords and its landowners, where the wealth is so kind of centered and there is still a certain feudal element to this, a country that has given up all of its, which used to be a really good industrial country, and it's given up all of that over the last 50 years to become basically just the center of trade and financial services. How they could think that the country leaving such a market, how that would be beneficial to them. I've never understood how that logic worked. Now, we all know why some of the guys in politics, some of the politicians were pro-Brexit, because they all had a vested interest getting out of the EU, because of the EU was going to clamp down on tax evasion and tax avoidance and offshoring and all that kind of stuff. And obviously they were scared about their own money. It had nothing to do with trying to make the UK as a whole better.
Just hasn't happened.
So mixed.
Here's another one.
Young people. We've got a lot of young...
So this one is a bit close to my heart. I've got 3 young kids. I am German, but I'm actually South African. And I have a German passport. And I don't want to say I feel European. I actually still feel South African, but that's irrelevant. What is relevant is that when my kids were born, they had the world at their feet. They had Europe at their feet. Now they don't.
Young people listening to this podcast, the newsagents, and I wonder what your message to them would be now. They are, reaching voting age or above voting age and thinking, I could have had a future which involved working, travelling, seeing huge swathes of Europe, being totally at home with the open borders. My life would not have stopped here, at the borders. I could have gone and worked and learnt and had experiences as you did for much of your life. Is there any message to young people now who are thinking, Brexit has shut down, has actually shut down our horizons. It's stopped so many people from having so many experiences now.
So, I think that overstates it massively. Last time I looked, it's not illegal to work in the European Union.
It's much harder.
It's got a bit more complicated, but
I hate this sort of bullshit. It's a bit more no, it's massively more complicated. And that is the thing that changes people's decisions. It goes from, I'm just going to, buy a ticket and pass off to France for a couple of years, work there, God knows, maybe even find somebody, marry, have some kids there, maybe come back some years later, I don't know, do what I want to do. That's not the case anymore.
More limited.
Large numbers of people still do that. It is still possible. It's no more complex than it has been to work in Australia, in America, in Canada.
To go and work in Australia, America and Canada is a massive undertaking. It is a huge amount of paperwork. Some people who have immigrated to Australia that I know, it took them over 5 years to even book their plane ticket to go there. And even then, when they're there, it takes years for them to really integrate and become citizens or whatever you want to do. Then there's additional taxes and stuff that you need to pay because you're not a local. It's bullshit. It is nonsense that this is even remotely the same as the situation we used to have between Europe and the UK.
The rest of the world all this time.
But the point is,
world
though,
of opportunity.
But we had it all. The difference is we didn't have that arrangement, with Canada, America, Australia. We did have it all when we were part of that large trading bloc. We could literally go and work for a whole year if you want.
So to me, I want to end this video on exactly that note, because I think that is the most important thing. We didn't not decide to do something. We decided to get rid of something which drastically limited our horizons, our possibilities, our trading opportunities, etc. And we did it decisively. We actually chose, I'm going to say we, some assholes down in England chose that and fucked it all up.